That's the thing. I was just going to say, I feel like self-worth. I mean, obviously, when you're working on marketing, so especially with solopreneurs, so much emotional stuff comes up around fear of being seen, around money, around this and that. But I remember when I was first coming up right out of college doing grassroots organizing, I remember feeling like every second I wasn't working, I was wasting funder money.
Right.
And I did, of course, I burnt out a few years later and then found myself on a spiritual path and like left activism for like 10 years and whatever, came back around. And now I feel like with the power of that grassroots organizing and the power of
Mm.
self-worth and self-love, I feel really comfortable talking about money and sustenance, like you're saying, because the fact is that you have to love yourself in order to have a well to dig from, to give to people. And so many of the people that we work with, I think that's one of the first obstacles that they bump into is they want to give, but they're giving from an empty well.
Oh man, that's so true. Yeah, and it's of course this is another place that all the isms show up. I mean, I don't know what are isms, the racism, sexism, capitalism, except institutionalized forms of hatred. It's all those the isms. When you have one of those, it just describes who is loved and who is loathed, who's at the top of the pyramid and who's at the bottom, who's got access to the levers of power because they deserve it somehow, and who doesn't, and where can violence be sent, up or down. All of that's there, and this gets internalized. And so you start to, if you grow up in capitalism, it's like, well, if I'm not producing, I'm worthless. Which is, there's that Instagram channel, the Nap Ministry,
Yes.
and it's God bless the people who run it, but it's just taking a nap is holy work. Resting is it's not. This is the thing. Resting is not the opposite of productivity.
Right.
It's just the rest of the story.
Right.
It's just the twin.
Hmm.
Dynamic activity and deep rest are go together. And in this culture, there's such a, and I struggle with it too. I mean, myself, more of a type A proclivity, but the the bias against rest, I would say also one could make the case this is a bias against the yin in the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if one needs to gender it, but one could make the case it's also the war against the feminine taken to another extreme, that you can't ever receive. You have to always be giving and producing. And so that's a war on life, because life sort of needs that. We do have
Yeah.
time into anyway. So yeah, I just see that so much. And so then if you hate rest, you hate yourself because you need it. And Mark Silver, one of my dear colleagues, speaks about this beautifully from a Sufi perspective, but that it's actually a kind of arrogance in a strange way, because we think we're being humble, but the arrogance is this. It's like when people have that kind of chatter in their head, like, well, I shouldn't need to rest. I should just be able to keep going. I should not need to sustain myself because, I just got to give, and I should just be able to push it through. It's like, oh, you're the one. The rest of us are human and have
Right.
needs, but
Yes.
you've transcended having needs. Hey, and of course, the other challenge with this is in a day and age that desperately needs village, that definitely it desperately needs the village mindedness and community. Though there's a lot of ways to create community, and not proper for me to prescribe how it should be in different places around the world. But I'll tell you, there's one way to kill community, and that's just be self-sufficient.
Hmm.
Never need anything. So our unwillingness to need things from people kills the very community we say we want to see. We want this beloved community, but we're not willing to lean on other people. We're not willing to ask for help. But that's the thing that creates community in the first place.
Yes. And thinking about rest, it's the year of the tiger, and I just wrote a little article about this. But I really love big cats because
Mm,
a tiger, for example, sleeps for 20 hours, literally 20 hours a day,
yeah.
and then the moment it needs to eat, it pounces, it kills, it eats, it goes back to resting and chilling. And my teacher, my spiritual teacher, talks about yin and yang, and we think that it's actually this balanced thing, but actually in nature, there's more yin than there is yang. It's not actually a one for one thing, that most of the time, rest is the way to go. Inaction is the way to go. And then occasionally, when it's right and ripe,
Mm.
it's time to act, which I think that's how planning is. It's like taking the time to kind of space things out and look at things and get clear on things. A lot of planning is like about nurturing the non-action, about nurturing the terrain,
Yeah.
getting clear on that, and then acting in ways that really conserve energy and get more bang for your buck so that you're not constantly working and burning yourself out.
It's the old carpenter's adage, measure twice, cut once.
Yeah.
And I can't remember, it was a samurai saying or something, but it was like, you draw your bow back for 100 years
Yeah.
before you release. There's just such a care to the aiming, to getting it right, so that when you take your shot, it hits the mark. Because that's the thing. It seems cheaper to flail because you're not having to spend the time, spend the money, all the attention you need to spend. But it's only in the short term is it cheaper. In the long term, planning saves obviously so much. Um, that's interesting about nature being mostly yin. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it makes so much sense to me. Yeah, it's the same, with martial arts. You're like board breaking. I remember I learned this, and your arm is so supple and relaxed until literally the second before it hits, and then there's the tension, and it breaks the board, and then yeah. If you walk around rigid all the time, it's no good. And that's the thing, too, is this flailing puts us in a place of fear and kind of reactivity and bracing. I think all the time,
Mm-hmm.
always braced, so we're always tense, and this is not a good. It's not a good look as an entrepreneur to be always on guard and tetchy about everything.
And it's a recipe for burnout because we think, I mean, even that kind of thinking is depleting. If we are bracing, we are actually using energy to stay in that kind of tense position.
It's
Eh,
yeah.